Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon for those of you who are online and maybe far away. Welcome to this hybrid seminar of the Illiberalism study program hosted at the Institute for European, Russian and Eurasian Studies here at GW. My name is Marlène Laruelle. I'm the director of the Illiberalism study program and of IRIS. And I'm delighted today to receive Michał Wawrykiewicz, who will be discussing a really very important topic, which is the dismantling of rule of law in Poland. And I think Poland is big in the news globally now, but it's mostly because of the war and in a sense what has been happening since the last year, and Poland kind of leading or being one of the front line of the war has kind of slightly modified the way the issues of rule of law were discussed. I think they are less visible, but they are still there and many things are still happening in Poland around that, but it has been a long trend of kind of dismantling rule of law, and Michał is really one of the best practitioner and also analysts who can discuss that with us. Michał is a Polish attorney specializing in constitutional law, human rights, and European law. He's also a legal and political analyst and a social activist. He co-founded the Free Court Initiative, which is a think tank and educational center set up to defend the rule of law. He also co-founded the Justice Defense Committee for the legal defense and support of Polish legal professionals, including a repressed judge of the different Polish courts, and he has been widely publishing on this issue, and we are delighted to host him today because he's a current fellow at the National Endowment for Democracy, and so he's spending a few months here in DC to discuss with us this worrisome dismantling of the rule of law in Poland. So welcome once again, and we are delighted to have you here, Michał. So I give you the floor.
So we'll start from the yeah. At the beginning, I want to show you the very short film, one of the examples of our activity when it comes to the communication of these complex issues like rule of law, independence of judiciary. This is one of our productions. Let's give it. Can we get a full screen?
Sure. On the right hand side. Or you might also want to share the sound with people on Zoom. Share it with the numbers. If you stop sharing really fast and then reshare, you click on that bottom left there.
Thank you.
Still learning after
Yeah.
3 years of COVID. That's incredible. Endless technology knowledge.
So, once again.
Nie na wolne pole, ale skuteczna interwencja i od autu wznowią grę zawodnicy w białych koszulkach. Ładne rozegranie. Tymczasem rywale wyprowadzają swoje piłki. Jedna piłka z prawej, druga z lewej. Atak obydwoma skrzydłami. Sędzia słusznie stosuje przywilej korzyści i gol! 2 raz! To są te indywidualne zdolności! Czarne koszulki idą za ciosem, przechwyt. Na powtórce widać brutalne uderzenie w twarz. Oj, dyskusje z sędzią mogą ich słono kosztować. Szarża białych zaraz wyjdzie sam na sam, ale niestety pułapka offside'owa. Tu nie potrzeba waru. Może teraz stały fragment gry, a w murze wszystkich 12 zawodników, no nie wygląda to ciekawie. Tymczasem mamy zmiany. Na boisku pojawi się powiew świeżości. I po co było tak szaleć? Czy biali mogą to jeszcze wygrać? Co tu się dzieje? Może teraz szansa dla białych koszulek na zmianę rezultatu. Niestety nie ma bramki. Nie ma bramki, proszę państwa. Bramki nie ma.
Tato, o co w tym chodzi?
To normalne, że was to dziwi. Trudno zrozumieć taką grę bez zasad.
Ten mecz wygląda tak jak walka o demokrację i praworządność w Polsce, którą my, obywatele, prowadzimy od 2000 dni.
Wciąż gramy, chociaż przeciwnik oszukuje i fauluje, ma władzę i komentatorów. Nie poddajemy się, gramy pressingiem, dryblujemy i mimo wszystko wciąż strzelamy bramki.
Oni na razie mają przewagę, ale to po naszej stronie są zasady i przyszłość. Nie pozwól, żeby wygrały czarne charaktery. Włącz się w mecz o wszystko.
Razem możemy go wygrać!
So one explanation, there was a film that we released years ago. On the occasion of publishing this report was called 2000 Days of Lawlessness. Right now is 2,500 Days of Lawlessness because we are recording everything from the beginning, from 2015 when the okay, sorry. That would be much better. Something is wrong. Start the slideshow.
You don't mind presenting like this?
It's okay, no problem. Okay, so that is one of the examples of our activity. I will tell you about it a little bit later on. But at the beginning, I would like to start from general remarks. Why this is a very good example of how relatively stable democracy like Poland can be very easily destroyed by a group of autocrats within a short period of time. This is the example that we have dealt with in a history when autocratic power went to power using democratic mechanisms. So in Poland, Polish government, which we have right now for last almost 8 years, has been elected in a democratic elections in 2015. And this is the situation where usually in a history happened in many countries. At the beginning, it seems to be quite attractive for the society because they hear slogans like, for example, that they are talking about the greatness of the nation, greatness and dignity of individuals, that we are a sovereign country better than the other ones, that we are chosen one, and so on and so on. They are standing up from our knees, and that kind of promises for the future. But it always ends very bad, as we perfectly know. And that is one of the examples. Poland is a very perfect example of that kind of scenario. And when I'm telling about, oh no, it doesn't work. Okay, I will go like this. So many questions that you can see here on the list are coming to my mind when I'm describing this history. Of course, it is not easy to answer all of them, but I will try to answer a couple of them to you. Of course, we'll start from what happened actually and why did it happen. But to understand this story, we have to at the beginning go through the recent history of Poland after 1989 very quickly and very smoothly. Because Poland, as you probably know, is a country with quite interesting democratic history. Starting back to 16th, 17th or 18th century, when in 1791 we had the second constitution in the world, second after American one, 2 years later, and it was very modern constitution at that time. But let's jump into the recent history after 1989. 1989 was in Poland. Poland was the first country which started that transition from a communist regime to liberal democracy, and it was the 4th of June 1989, the same day, the first Polish elections on the 4th of June, and the same day, the great massacre on the Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Coming back to this calendar, you should know that Poland was, as I said, the first country where this transition started, because the Berlin War and other changes in these communist countries like Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria were later in the autumn, November, December. But in Poland, it started in June, and that was a consequence of so-called round the table, where Polish solidarity movement led by great leader Lech Wałęsa started negotiations with communist regime, and the consequence of that negotiations at the round table were first free election, partly free election, not fully free election, but it very quickly appeared that on the basis of this first partly free elections, Solidarity movement was able to construct the first non-communistic government in the Eastern and Central Europe. And that's how modern recent history of Polish democracy started. And for the next 26 years, we have been building democracy, all the institutions, all fuses of democracy, independent prosecutor office, independent judiciary, independent, of course, Supreme Court, Constitutional Court, and as I said, all the fuses that protect us from, theoretically, protect us from nationalism, from autocracy. In 1997, Polish Parliament passed a very modern constitution, which is modeled on Western democracies patterns. And 2004, this is a very significant, I think one of the most significant dates in Polish history, accession to the European Union. That was the dream of generations. Dream of my generation of my father, mother, and my grandfathers. That was the symbolic date when Poland, as a country who dealt for 50 years with communism, finally reached the Western world, the world of prosperity, world of democracy, and everything that we dreamt about. And in 2014, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk becomes the president of the European Council. That was also a very symbolic sign for Poland that we are the country that fulfills all the criteria of the European Union. We are the real member that Western Europe can rely on. And this is a real democracy. One of the leaders of the transition, actually the leader of the transition from communism to democracy and to capitalism. But as it happened 1 year later in 2015, fully populist government with all these slogans that I said before, with the dignity of the individuals, with the greatness of our nation and sovereignty and criticism against the European Union and Western countries. They went to power with the democratic elections. And here you have main figures, key figures of this today's political scene. The one who is actually the most important is ruling our country is Jarosław Kaczyński. He's the leader of the party. The party is somehow purposely called Law and Justice. And the leader of Law and Justice, Jarosław Kaczyński, is ruling our nation and our country, actually. The president and the prime minister and others are actually the puppets of him, and he is the one who is making decisions. So I'm telling about Andrzej Duda, who is the president, who was also elected. He's incumbent president right now in Poland, and he was also elected in democratic, for the first time in 2015 in democratic elections. But he is the one who he's a man without charisma. He's completely subordinated to the chairman of the party, so he fulfills his orders, actually, which is also important from my perspective, from the perspective of the rule of law and independence of judiciary, because he signs all the bills that are passed by the parliament without any doubts, and he signs all the appointments for judges, because he's, according to the constitution, the one who is responsible for appointments of judges and promotions of judges, appointments of justice of the Supreme Court. And Zbigniew Ziobro is a very important figure also, because he's the Minister of Justice, but at the same time, he is the Prosecutor General, because in 2016, this government joined these two positions, political position of a Minister of Justice, member of the government, and at the same time, Prosecutor General, who is the head of the whole prosecutor office. So very important figure, very dangerous person, very vindictive person. And he's the one who is also important for the destruction of the rule of law in Poland. So actually, let's go and try to answer the question, what happened? It's not easy to change it. I will try, okay. 2015, 2016, right at the beginning, just after they took the power, the first attack, first assault on the constitutional bodies. Here you see the Constitutional Court, Prosecutor Office, public television, public media, and electoral system. The first target was the Constitutional Court. Constitutional Court in Poland is a special court, according to the Constitution, which is responsible for compliance of all laws passed by the Parliament with the Constitution. So it is a protection for minority against majority. So if the majority in the Parliament passes any laws which are openly violating the Constitution, the Constitutional Court, independent Constitutional Court, is designed to stop it, to challenge if they are constitutional or not. So that was the first target of the attack. And within 1 year, to December 2016, Polish Constitutional Court was completely paralyzed with, of course, with unconstitutional actions, but it was in fact paralyzed, so it couldn't exist as an independent judicial body that is able to check if all these laws are constitutional or not. That was a very important factor, because after 2016, the government was able to pass any law in the parliament, which is obviously unconstitutional, but nobody could challenge it. And prosecutor office, of course, as I said, is a very important asset in the hand of the government, because nobody from the circles of the government can be charged criminally, because they have a protection of the prosecutor office and all the prosecutors in the country. And at the same time, of course, on the opposite, guys from the opposition parties and also from civil society can be charged anytime for fake charges, and so we are facing that kind of actions from the prosecutor's office. Public television became the propaganda machine of the government. It's unbelievable, primitive propaganda machine. When I was a kid, I remember the television from the communist time, and that was more sophisticated than it is right now. Right now, it's so primitive. They're all the time glorifying the government, how fantastic it is, and how bad is the opposition, and how the civil society, how the European Union is an enemy, and so on and so on. And of course, the electoral system. This is a very important factor, because like Stalin said, nobody, it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes. So that's how they changed the system, to keep all the clerks, electoral clerks, in their hands, and the electoral system shaped for the government. And at the top of this electoral system, we have a special chamber, newly created chamber in the Supreme Court, which is responsible for acceptance of the election results, so they can accept or not whether the results are good or bad for the government. But from my point of view, from the point of view of independence of judiciary, this is the most important moment in the recent history. 2017, that was the year of frontal attack on the independence of judiciary, because in the middle of the year, during vacation, the parliament passed 3 laws that completely changes the system of judiciary in Poland. First of all, Supreme Court, you can imagine or not, the horror of the horrors, they decided to expel all the justices of the Supreme Court. We have different Supreme Court, and here in the United States, we have around 100 people in the Supreme Court. At that time, there was like 80, 90 inside the Supreme Court. They decided to fire all of them. And the Minister of Justice, the guy who is the Prosecutor General, was supposed to appoint which of them can stay or not in the court. So that was horrible. Finally, they changed it, and they changed it in the final version. Only those who are over 65 were to be removed from the court. That was a new retirement age. Of course, that was the obvious violation of the constitution of independence of judiciary. That was the violation of European laws, of the treaties and charter of fundamental rights. A second, I think the most important change was the National Judiciary Council. The National Judiciary Council is the body which is responsible in Polish constitution for, it's a guardian of the independence of judiciary and independence of judges. This is 25 people in this council, but there are representatives of legislative power, there are representatives of executive power, but 15 of them, the majority of them, are judges who should be, according to the constitution, elected, appointed by other judges, by judiciary. But what the government changed, they changed it in a way that these 15 people inside the council are elected by the majority in the parliament. So they changed this council to a complete political body subordinated to the government. And since that time, the National Judiciary Council started to be a factory of judges, actually, a factory of new judges, completely loyal to the government, because this council is responsible for appointing judges, justices of the Supreme Court, and promotions of the judges. So they prepare the motion and they send it to the president, and the president signs it. That is the way. So once they captured National Judiciary Council in 2018, that was the moment then they started to stuff the system with their people. So right now, if we have 10,000 judges, all with the whole amount of judges in Poland, 10,000, and almost 3,000 of them are so-called neo-judges. We call them neo-judges, so improperly appointed judges, completely loyal to the government. They are in a whole hierarchy, also in the Supreme Court. 50%, more than 50% of justices of the Supreme Court right now are neo-judges. And also Chief Justice of the Supreme Court right now is a neo-judge. And they created also disciplinary chamber at that time. The disciplinary chamber, we called the disciplinary chamber the Inquisition chamber, because it was specially designed by the government to repress independent judges, to be able to get rid of them if they are not comfortable, or their judgments, their decisions are not comfortable for the government. So that was a body inside the Supreme Court, but completely independent from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, fully staffed by people loyal to the Minister of Justice, mostly prosecutors loyal to the Minister of Justice. So that was the Inquisition chamber, and that was one of the main points, actually the main point of a conflict between Polish government and the European Union in the future. Finally, after a couple of years, last year, this chamber was liquidated as a consequence of the pressure of the European Union, pressure of judgments which were issued by European courts. And what else? This legal conflict between Polish government and in Europe, European Union, European Council, is based on the claims of Polish government. Those are the main points of which are claimed by the government, that that all the changes in the judiciary that I described to you are fully in line with the constitution and fully in line with the European standards. And they use the Article 5 of the Treaty on the European Union, which says that competences not conferred upon the Union in the treaties remain with the member states. So when it comes to the judgment, if any competence belongs to the member state or to the Union, the shaping of the judiciary is on the side of the member state, but under one condition, only one condition, and this is the condition that the judiciary has to be independent. Of course, government can do whatever they want. They can have 100 justices in the Supreme Court, then they can have 10 justices in the Supreme Court, then they can have 3 or 4 instances in the courts. They can have the color of robes can be black, yellow, red, whatever. This is the decision of the member state, but under one condition, that this judiciary is independent from the executive power and from the legislative power. So that claim of the government is, of course, not true. The other claim is that Polish constitution has a primacy over the European Union law, which is also not true, because according to jurisprudence of the Court of Justice since 1960s, it is obvious that European Union law has a supremacy over domestic laws of the member states. This is, of course, the consequence of logic. Otherwise, it would be such a mess in the European Union. It could not function properly, because this is a community based on law. This is the union of law. And so all the countries have to fulfill the same criteria. And one of these fundamental criteria is, of course, independence of judiciary and preservance of the rule of law. So that is also not true when it comes to constitutional provisions against the European Union law. The European Union law is has a supremacy of all provisions, also constitutional provision, and it comes from these jurisprudence of the Court of Justice. And the other very important argument that actually government creates a fake conflict between European standards and Polish standards. And when we look at the Polish constitution and we look at the European laws, I mean the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 6, or European Treaty, Article 19, and the Charter of Fundamental Rights, Article 47, the standards is absolutely the same. This is the independence of judiciary, that the country should provide the guarantee of independence of judiciary. That's the same standard, so there is no conflict. It's only fake conflict is coming from Polish government. And since that time, when Polish government realized that they are in the defense, that actually most of international institutions, actually all of them, Venice Commission, the American Bar Associations, the associations of judges in Europe, United Nations, Special Rapporteur of the United Nations, all of them claim that all of these changes in Polish judiciary, Polish rule of law, are violating European and world standards, actually, of the independence of judiciary. So I jump to the question, what has been done by European institutions and by Polish society. So the very important issue is, the very important factor is that since the beginning, and that is the difference for example, between Poland and Hungary, that since the beginning, since 2015, Polish society, civil society was very active on that battlefield. So starting to protest, took the streets, and hundreds of thousands of people everywhere protested against the first assault on the Constitutional Court. And then in 2017, when the attack on the Supreme Court and other institutions of European Union, of constitutional protection of independence of judiciary were attacked. And at that time, many new NGOs, organizations started to, or has been formed. And one of them was my organization, which is called Free Courts Initiative. That is the very small organization founded by 4 lawyers only. And we are, I would say, multitasking organization that is doing many things, because we are doing educational work. That is what we started from, because we started when these huge protests in 2017, when so thousands of people were on the streets in every city and town in Poland where there was a court. We had people on the streets protesting, but they protested against something that they did not understand precisely, but because the independence of judiciary is a very abstractive issue. It's really difficult to understand why this independence of judiciary is so needed if you do not have a court case, for example. So we started to explain these issues in a new way, like producing films. Started from films with very famous actors, because we were able to manage to hire them to our films. Of course, they were working pro bono for our films, and we were telling hypothetical stories at that time. But look, if you are going to the court, you have a case against the state, against a tax office, against the member of the parliament who is from the ruling party, or his colleague. And if you have the court at that time appointed by this government, you do not have any chance to win the case. So that was the way how we were trying to convince the society to fight, to resist against all these changes. We organized many demonstrations, events, conferences, panels. We are doing advocacy in Europe, especially in European Union, where we're traveling a lot and meeting with main figures of the European Union, with the Commission, with members of Parliament. We're having hearings in domestic parliaments in many Western countries. And of course, we are doing legal jobs. So we are representing those judges who are repressed in the parliament, who are repressed by the government. And this is a special coalition that we formed in 2018. It is called Justice Defense Committee. And so we are providing legal aid to judges, justices of the Supreme Court, to prosecutors who are repressed by the government, openly repressed by the government, because they are independent. So legal defense, representation in the court, also in Europe, in Court of Justice in Luxembourg, in Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, monitoring and recording all of the violations. This is a very good example. This is the record of all actions since 2015. Page by page, day by day, it's 50 pages of the actions of the government since 2015. It is constantly updated on our website. So we are organizing conferences, like here on the picture in front of the Supreme Court, every time when something is happening in this court. So we are pushing the constant pressure on the government. We have in the Justice Defense Committee over 200 proceedings defending Polish judges and prosecutors. And it is a very serious matter, because judges and justices of the Supreme Court are facing not only disciplinary proceedings, but they are facing sometimes criminal proceedings. As you can see, inside this coalition is Amnesty International, it is Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights, and many others, and also associations of Polish judges. 2018 was the 2018 was the year when we realized that we cannot fight inside Poland because all the institutions are captured. So constitutional court is captured. So we cannot challenge these new laws which are passed by the parliament. So we have to jump into the European, onto the European level, to European courts, to the Commission, and use those institutions. So that was the first case, very important case, where we were able to convince the European Commission to act in favor of Polish justices of the Supreme Court, those over 65 who were to be removed in 2018. Among them, there was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. She was also to be removed, even if she was in the middle of her constitutional term. There's a constitutional term of 6 years for the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and they wanted to remove her also from the court. So we were able to convince the European Commission to start the action, to start so-called infringement procedure. The infringement procedure is a procedure against the state who is violating these fundamental rights. So we were able to, so we are able to convince the Commission, even if it was a very precedential case, to start this case against Poland. And that was the first big success on this European level, because the Court of Justice in Luxembourg issued so-called interim measure, allowing these justices of the Supreme Court to get back to the court, to their panels, to adjudication. And of course, also the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. It's many other cases started on the European level at that time. I was able to represent justices of the Supreme Court in the main case, which was called AK case. You can see on the picture one of the hearings in the Court of Justice. That case was important because for the first time, a Court of Justice in Luxembourg ruled that this new National Judiciary Council is not independent. So it cannot be the one who is appointing Polish judges or promoting Polish judges. And at the same time, this disciplinary chamber, which I called Inquisition chamber, is not the court in the meaning of European Union law. And as a consequence of this ruling, Polish Supreme Court, you can see in one room, 60 justices of the Supreme Court, they issued the very important resolution saying, confirming what I already said, that the National Judiciary Council is not the independent body, the disciplinary chamber is not the court, and all the rulings, repressing rulings against Polish judges are unlawful, and also, which is very important, that the appointments made by this new council are unlawful, has a legal defect. Well, here you have the instruments of the European Union law, which were used during that years. That is Article 7, which was used for the first time in the history of the European Union against Poland. That was supposed to be nuclear weapon, as it was called, but it is not the nuclear weapon because it is a political tool, and in practice it is not the nuclear weapon. The nuclear weapon, or maybe not nuclear weapon, but the most effective tools are the judicial tools that were used in the courts, in the Court of Justice in Luxembourg, and also in the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, but because we were able to get right now around 45 cases, to win 45 cases in these courts against Polish government. And also very important, but accidental tool is a recovery and resilience fund. This is a fund that was designed by the European Union in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, to restore economies of the European Union after pandemic. It was worth 800 billion euros for the whole Europe. That was today's Marshall Plan, actually, for Europe. And 58 billions out of these 800 were designed for Poland. And we didn't get even €1 from that time because of the violation of the rule of law. That was, and that is, the most efficient tool of the European Union that was used. Actually, we can jump into the Q&A session right now because there are so many questions to be answered.
I think so. Thank you so much, Michał, for this really wonderful, super comprehensive overview of what has been happening. A really great presentation, I think, giving us a lot of things to sort. So there are questions coming from the chat, and then there will probably be questions in the room. So maybe I can just take two questions we have from the chat, and then we'll give the floor to the room. First question, how has political polarization in Polish society changed in the years since peace came to power, and how the government is relying on this division to stay in power? One kind of broad question. A second one, is there a kind of regional differentiation? I mean, courts are mostly centralized, but you also have municipal authorities or regional authorities in Poland that are kind of more liberal, and some regions that are really more kind of illiberal. So how does that play a role on the capacity of the local judicial system to deal with the tensions? Maybe we begin with that, and then we open the floor.
Okay, so when it comes to the first question, the polarization, it's I have recently read the book of Ezra Klein, Why We Are So Polarized, which I strongly recommend to you to read. And this is, I think, something that is happening everywhere in the world, also in Poland, the strong polarization. And after peace went to power, the law of justice went to power in 2015, this polarization strengthened, actually. And so we are right now completely polarized, like two tribes. We are not the same nation. We are two tribes, the tribe of the government and the tribe of the opposition. That's how it looks like in Poland. And we cannot communicate with each other. We cannot convince each other. It's completely impossible. So this is how it looks like. And when it comes to the government, they like it because this is easier to manage their supporters in that way, because then they have they're shaping, or they are describing opposition side and the civil society as an enemies, and the European Union as an enemies, and they are the only one who are patriots, and they are the only one who are able to rule our country. When it comes to local governments, they unfortunately do not have any competence to change judiciary rules. So yes, you are right that there are so many places in Poland, especially big cities like Warsaw, like Poznań, like Gdańsk, Wrocław. Those are big cities or Kraków, where opposition has a power in a municipality, but it's only local government, local power. They do not have anything to do with the judiciary.
Let's open the floor for question in the room. Yes, down there. Yeah. And wait for the mic, please, down here, and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for the great talk. I'm Sam Lee, a postdoc here for Illiberalism studies. I was just wondering how, was this possible? I mean, for example, looking at this country, this country has a crazy leader, right? But Donald Trump couldn't change any kind of rural system, judiciary or any kind of legislative system at all. He was trying to do, but possibly because of highly decentralized systems in this country and so many veto points, right, are blocking any kind of fundamental reforms, whether positive or negative. So I was wondering, if kind of highly centralized system in Poland or relatively fewer veto points could help undemocratic leaders change everything at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, how it could happen is always $1 million question, because it's very hard to answer this question. But when you look at these points, first of all, populist slogans. 8 years of pro-European liberal government in Poland between 2007 and 2015. The government who was taking care of the economy, do not putting money directly to people's pockets. And at the same time, the new government, the new power is coming that promising new programs like 500 zloty for each children every month directly to people's pocket. That was a very good promise to convince people to vote on them. And at the same time, this anti-European rhetoric emphasizing the sovereignty of Poland, the greatest of the nation, and this kind of slogans. And when it comes to the judiciary, to be honest, the judicial system before 2015 was not so modern and didn't fulfill people's expectations, because courts were not sufficient enough, were not modern enough, were working like the offices from 20th century. So people wanted, society wanted real reform of the judiciary. And that was what the government promised them. We will give you a real reform of the judiciary. The courts are going to be more modern and more friendly to their clients and so on. But answering your question about centralizing or more local government on the judiciary, of course, it's always better to decentralize the power. It's always more democratic to decentralize the power. But the answer for the question why it happened is also based in legal culture, I would say, and the democratic culture, democratic traditions. Poland had only 26 years of democratic tradition. Before we had 50 years of communism, and before we had 123 years of partiality of Poland. So Poland didn't exist on the map. So actually, for 170 years, Poland didn't exist as a sovereign country, as a democratic country. So we didn't have too much democratic traditions and democratic culture, democratic or legal culture. So nobody was, and also what was very important at the beginning, I always say that if you have first symptoms of the attack on the constitutional institution, you have to react quickly and firmly, quickly. You cannot wait. And many of influential people in Poland, like journalists, politicians, representatives of civil society, they were saying at the beginning, 2015, oh, let's not over-exaggerate. Let's wait for a moment. Let's look, let's give them a chance. Maybe they are not so bad. And it appeared that after first symptoms, and when we saw this first assault on the Constitutional Court in the late fall 2015, I was completely sure that it will end very bad. So that is my answer.
There was a question here.
Hello, thank you for joining us today. It's very lovely to see you. I'm from the Czech Republic. I'm an international student here, master's program in security policy studies. So I have a question about the new law that seems to be in process that would establish more polling stations so that more people can come actually and vote.
You mean electoral law?
Exactly. Do you think that this will have some sort of impact on elections, on the preference of the population when it comes to supporting peace or not? Do you think we will have some sort of change here? And one more question. What is the future of the Visegrad work when it comes to the situation with Poland? Is there something that your regional allies can do to support you? What is the best case scenario to have a chance?
First of all, when it comes to these changes in the electoral law, of course, they are doing it to win the elections. That's for sure. And one of the standards, legal standards of the civilized world is that we are not changing electoral law in the year of elections. And that's what they are doing right now, because we have elections in the fall, in October. And so government realizes actually in Poland that they do not have enough support to win the election. So then they want to shape the electoral system to be able to win the next election. So more polls actually close to the churches. This is the idea of them, because unfortunately Polish Catholic Church is a big ally of this populist government. So every church is like small ally of the government, where you can hear the speeches of priests supporting government. So they expect that on the day of the election, it will be the huge support from priests, from churches. So that's why they are changing it. And I do not have any doubts, and nobody had doubts, that these amendments in the electoral law are designed for the government. And when it comes to your second questions, first of all, congratulations for your new president. That's absolutely amazing person. And I would love to have that kind of president in Poland in the future. And so I believe that maybe in the nearest future, after the election in Poland, that will be the change to renew the Visegrad Four, because local cooperation between these four countries is so important for the future and for each of our countries. So the only possible answer on that question is let's go for it.
Do we have more questions in the room? I have one, if you give me the one more question coming from the chat related to something I mentioned in the introduction. Did Poland use this place in dealing with the Ukrainian war as a way to kind of bargain with the EU in relations to rule of law and EU pressure, and trying to put that aside in the name of kind of geopolitical interest of the current war?
Yeah, that is also a very good question, because of course Polish government is trying to and was trying to use this argument from the beginning when the war started. When the war started, they immediately went to Brussels and started to convince the president of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, saying that, look, we have the enemy, very strong, very dangerous enemy on the borders. We have this dangerous war. We have to support Ukraine. So let's forget about these issues related to the rule of law, because it is not so important right now. We have a much more important issue, which is not true, of course. And finally, after a couple of months, after almost 1 year of the war, European Commission realized that let's not match these two issues. And a very good example of answer on that question was a speech of Ursula von der Leyen here in the United States at Princeton University in November, I think. She said that Polish society is behaving perfectly well when it comes to refugees, when it comes to humanitarian aid, when it comes to military aid to Ukraine. But at the same time, Polish government is violating rule of law. So let's not match these two issues. Polish government has to fulfill orders of European courts, has to fulfill instructions from European Commission, and that's all, full stop. And also Polish government is using that rhetoric in the relations with the American administration, that we are strong allies, we have American soldiers on our soil, and this is the most important issue. Let's forget about this rule of law, and this is how they are trying to work. And what I can observe here, once I have a possibility to talk with many people on the Hill or with the administration, they are fully aware about the importance of protection of rule of law in Poland, because this is also a question of transatlantic relationships between the United States and European Union and European countries. It is much better for the United States to have an ally, which is 500 million people, one body, which is a community, which is a community of same values, democratic values. If you have 27 separate countries which are arguing or sometimes fighting each other, some of them are autocratic, some of them are democratic, it's much, much worse for the United States. So that's why they are taking care of that issue as well.
Thank you so much, Michał. Maybe one more question before we finish, except if there are questions from the room. I'm happy to give the floor. People in the room. Yes, give you the floor.
Hello, another SPS student here. I just wanted to ask, how durable do you see the current administration's changes being? How long is it going to take to reestablish normalcy, rule of law and judiciary?
In Poland?
Yes.
That is, of course, a very difficult issue, a precedential issue, because never happened before. That kind of destruction of the rule of law, of the country as a whole, and the whole system, constitutional system, that never happened before. So the process of restoration of the rule of law in Poland will be very difficult. And that's why we are already preparing to it. Not as a political opposition, but as a civil society and legal community. That's why, for example, last year, 2021 we started, we built a coalition of civil society, which was called Agreement for the Rule of Law. And together with associations of judges, associations of lawyers, we prepared a draft legislation on how to restitute the rule of law in Poland. And that draft legislation was filed to the parliament by the opposition, by opposition parties. Of course, it was rejected by the majority, today's majority, but it is ready. So it waits for October's elections and possible victory of opposition. So we believe that it is possible to restitute the rule of law in Poland. It will be extremely difficult process, but we are prepared to it. We know how to do that.
One more question.
Hello, my name is Kellen. I was just wondering, where is the government getting its policy ideas to crack down on the rule of law? Are they pulling it from other autocratic regimes abroad? Are there think tanks, conservative think tanks they're pulling it from? Is it the policymakers themselves? Where are these ideas coming from to form the disciplinary chamber, to form these different things? It's not just out of thin air, is it?
Some of the ideas are coming from other autocratic countries, like from Russia. They prepared a new law on NGOs, which is directly based on Russian legislation. And at the beginning of their government, chairman of our Law and Justice Party promised that they will build another Budapest in Warsaw. So they are also looking at Orban's government, and they are trying to find some ideas and some patterns in Hungary. So this is how they are working, and they have also autonomous ideas from themselves. So this disciplinary chamber was their idea, because it is a dream of all autocrats to capture the judiciary, because you have to remember that always judiciary, independent judiciary, is the shield for the society, for citizens, the only shield actually against the government and the legislative power. And at the same time, it's the only way to control the government. So it always starts like that. it was in Germany in 30s. Hitler, the first target was independent judiciary. What is normal behavior of all autocrats to destroy the judiciary at the beginning, not to have any independent control from the judiciary. So this is what they did in Poland as well.
Okay, well, on that note, I would have preferred to finish on the notes of the previous question, which was a more optimistic one about like election upcoming.
Maybe just one
Yes,
sentence,
please.
optimist
Yes, please.
sentence, is that remember about the role of a civil society in every country, in every nation, that if you mobilize the civil society, if the civil society is strong, is active, and the legal community, the role of lawyers and legal community is also very important in each country, because they can help the government to destroy the democracy, to destroy the rule of law, but at the same time they can help resistance. They can help to resist against the authoritarian government. So the difference, I told you, there is a difference between Poland and Hungary. Unfortunately, it's very sad. In Hungary, civil society is very silent, very passive. In Poland, civil society is very active. So the difference is that we will be able, probably this year, to liberate. And in Hungary, unfortunately, they will stay in the darkness for next decade, unfortunately. So that is the difference. Always active civil society.
Thank you so much for that concluding remark, Michał. We wanted to thank you for coming, talking to us and giving us this really wonderful, comprehensive overview of the situation. Also thanking you for everything
That
you
was
are
a
doing
pleasure
there
for
and
me.
having so many courageous
Thank you very much for
values and
invitation.
activities. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking